This is Michael Popok, so it must be time for Legal AF After Dark. What's going on in Georgia? Why doesn't Judge MacAfee just set the trial of Donald Trump and stop screwing around as to whether Fani Willis has to be removed as the district attorney on the case because she went out for drinks and traveled with somebody that's on her own team? Who cares? Unless there's an actual conflict of interest or some sort of fiduciary or financial benefit that's coming to Fani Willis, she stays on the case. We all know that. Getting ready for the hearing this Friday in front of Judge MacAfee, my colleague, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, a former prosecutor herself. We break it all down for you on Legal AF. Take a listen. Let's dive right in. I want to hear all about my illustrious partner, Karen Friedman Agnifilo. We've got the last witness, apparently, in this bullshit evidentiary hearing that Scott McAfee, the judge, brought upon himself by the way he's handling this particular matter. Not the way I would have. Terrence Bradley, why don't you tell our audience about the testimony? What do you think the impact of it is? And what you can do some commentary, of course, about what do you think is going to happen with Judge McAfee when he hears the argument of counsel and the decision about whether he's going to get rid of Fani Willis and or Nathan Wade and or dismiss the indictment as a result of whatever she did in her off hours.
Yeah, well, so this was a situation where Michael Roman, who is one of Trump's co-defendants, his lawyer, Ashley Merchant, was used to be a huge supporter of Nathan Wade when he was running for office. And I guess he was running for judge. There's even pictures of her wearing Wade for judge, or whatever it said on her t-shirt. And she then made this blockbuster accusation in a motion on behalf of Michael Roman, the defendant, that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade were having an affair, and as a result, that Fani Willis should be removed from the case. She should be disqualified from the case because of this affair, and Nathan Wade is unqualified, and that he got paid so much money and she was lining her pockets, and therefore there's a conflict of interest. She only hired him so that she could make all this extra money, and hired her boyfriend who was unqualified. So that was the accusation. Judge McAfee ordered a hearing, and unfortunately he didn't limit the scope of the hearing. The hearing should have been about whether or not there is a disqualifying conflict of interest. And a disqualifying conflict of interest under the law would be if there is, for example, a financial motive in a case. So prosecutors are all public servants, and they're all paid a salary, not hourly and not on contingency, meaning they get paid whether they win or whether they lose, whether they work a lot or work a little. And that's a good thing, because you don't want to incentivize a prosecutor to do, for example, extra work or more work so that they'll make more money, or you don't want it to be outcome determinative, right? You don't want it to be a situation where a prosecutor only gets paid if they win, because you could imagine a scenario where they would not do justice and they would cut corners or potentially do nefarious things in order to try to win. And that is contrary to public policy, contrary to justice, and that would be disqualifying. So if for some reason she hired an unqualified person and was paying him tons of money, and then he was lavishing her with gifts and vacations and all of that, which is all that was laid out in this motion, that could potentially be disqualifying. Whether or not she has a relationship, whatever that means, by the way, because it was never defined about what that would mean at this hearing. That really has nothing to do with this case, right? What if they had feelings for one another but never acted on them? Would that matter? What if they had a one-night stand? Would that count? What if it was just a kiss? Or what if it was just sexual with no feelings? Whatever. The point is, that is neither here nor there. You could be best friends with someone and hire your friend or your cousin or your sibling or whatever. You could hire anyone and there could be a financial conflict of interest. It has nothing to do with whether or not somebody had sex with each other. But for whatever reason, Judge MacAfee did not keep the hearing focused or tell everybody to keep the hearing focused and have it be on this financial conflict of interest that could be disqualifying. Instead, it was like an episode of Real Housewives of Fulton County. And I thought it was kind of appalling that they spent, I don't know, 90% of the time talking about uh, whether or not there was sex, whether or not there was these vacations and who paid for them, and whether or not anyone saw them romantically, etc. But they never got specific or precise in the questioning. And so a lot of things were left open and vague. And it was things about, well, yes, they were in a relationship, or yes, the relationship started before they said it did. But no one ever defined what they meant by that, right? By a relationship. So the hearing was just all over the place. And the hearing was over after a 2 days worth of testimony, where there was an ex-friend / disgruntled employee of the Fulton County DA's office. She believes that the relationship started before Fani Willis and Nathan Wade said it did, and they said the relationship started after he was hired, that it had nothing to do with hiring him, by the way. And so this woman testified without any specificity about, I saw them kiss, I saw this, nothing like that. It was very speculative. And then Nathan Wade testified very clearly that the relationship started afterward and it ended before Trump was even arrested. So it was a somewhat brief romantic relationship. Fani Willis testified the same. They called her father to the stand to show that Fani Willis always kept cash, because one of the things they talked about was she paid her own way, and she always paid Nathan Wade back in cash. And it was clear that nobody believed. I mean, these are two officers of the court. These are two lawyers. She's the elected district attorney. I mean, she has a sworn duty to tell the truth, to be honest. And just by allowing all this extra testimony to impeach them, it just shows that really Judge MacAfee, I don't think, believes what he heard, because again, the defendant here did not meet his burden that there was a disqualifying conflict of interest, yet the judge is allowing all this collateral impeachment material, which is typically not allowed for collateral information. And so just when we thought everything was done, we find out, and we were just waiting on summations and then a judge's decision about whether Fani Willis is taken off the case. We suddenly find out that Nathan Wade's divorce attorney and ex-law partner, Mr. Bradley, that were previously, I guess, the source of Ashley Merchant's information about this relationship looks like it was Terrence Bradley, or at least that's what it seemed like, that he's the one who said that. And so they wanted to call him to the stand, but he said, look, all the conversations I had with Nathan Wade were privileged. He hired me in the context of being a divorce attorney. And so at first, he wasn't going to be allowed on the stand to have to disclose those communications. Well, the judge spoke to Mr. Bradley in his chambers without the parties. It's called in camera, is what they call that. And they had a conversation, and the judge made inquiries and determined that, number one, the communications about when the relationship started were A, not privileged, and B, the other thing we found out was that Delta Airlines had complied with the subpoena and gave the judge information about airline tickets and all of that to potentially, I guess, support or corroborate or impeach Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. So they reopened the hearing and they called Mr. Bradley to the stand, and we watched another installment or episode of Real Housewives of Fulton County. I mean, it was ridiculous. And the other thing too is, first of all, some of the worst lawyering I've ever seen. They absolutely did not, once again, especially Mr. Roman's lawyer, does not know how to ask a question, does not know how to get specific information. And so it was torture to watch. And the other thing that was torture to watch was he couldn't have been clearer, Mr. Bradley, was that he's like, I was speculating, yeah, I believe that the relationship started earlier and started before he was hired, but I was speculating. And it just struck me as typical gossip, right? Typical gossip. People think, oh, yeah, that relationship must have started a long time ago. They're two very good looking, very successful, very powerful lawyers and judges and DAs. They've worn many hats, each of them. And I could, of course, I could imagine a scenario once they do get together, somebody thinking that the relationship started sooner. And so he was very clear that that was all speculation and that he was not precise when Ashley Merchant asked him, so is this true? Did the relationship start sooner? He said yes. But I could tell you right now that a lot of people thought he came across as not credible, that he looked cagey, that he was lying. He said when asked, did you lie to Miss Merchant when you told her that the relationship started earlier? He said, I don't believe so, or something kind of sketchy like that, something that was a little bit hedging. He really didn't emphatically say, no, I'm not a liar. That's what I thought. And so he did come across, I think, not great. He clearly did not want to be there. And I would say it was kind of he was neither here nor there, because he didn't seem credible. He didn't really provide any information under oath, right? Just because he said something in a text message, if he doesn't say it under oath, it's still, even if he's not credible, it still doesn't prove the point they're trying to make, right? It doesn't prove that this relationship started when they said it did. And again, who gives a what about when the relationship started? But now we're in a situation where if they lied, right? If Fani Willis and Nathan Wade lied to Judge MacAfee, I can tell you right now, he's going to pull them off the case, and then it's game over. How are you going to find another prosecutor? Because the whole office will have to be taken off the case if Fani Willis is, because she's the boss. How are you going to find someone else, another office who's going to prosecute these 18 defendants with Ken Chesborough, who's has a fake Twitter account and supposedly cooperating, but he's clearly talking out of both sides of his mouth. So prosecutor's going to have to manage him. You've got this crazy trial. I think it could be game over for the case. I mean, you've got the former governor was one of the witnesses who testified at the original part of this hearing, right? The former governor, very, very respected lawyer, seasoned, very high profile person who's used to high profile situations. He turned down this case. He turned Fani Willis down when she asked him first before Nathan Wade if he wanted to do this case. Why? Because he said, I don't want all the death threats. I don't want to deal with this. I know what happens when you go into Trump's orbit and you prosecute him. You spend your life with 24-hour security and death threats. Who needs that? So if you've got one of the most powerful people who's used to high profile, powerful position in Georgia, who's not going to be a shrinking violet, he's turning it down. Who are you going to find who's going to actually take this case if Fani Willis is disqualified? She is a public servant. We should be thanking the Lord that she is willing to put her life on hold and completely sacrifice her safety, her life, her reputation to be put through the ringer like this. And instead, we're having a hearing about her private life and her relationship. So I don't know. I actually don't know what to make of it anymore, what's going to happen and what this judge is going to do, because he lost all control of this hearing to begin with. What do you think, Popok?
I think he lost all control of this hearing from the begin with. I would not have handled it that way. This shit just showed there are moments where you see he was doing great for long periods of time, but there are just moments that it just comes from inexperience. He hasn't been on the bench before. He's never dealt, of course, with these kind of issues before. He has a clear sense of what he wanted to accomplish, but he's completely inconsistent. He said at the top, I won't let this become, dragging Fani Willis and Nathan Wade through the mud. It's exactly what's happened. He needed to, as I've said before, after he needed to let's do the legal argument first. Let me hear what your arguments are. let me see the proffer of what you think the evidence will show, and then I'll decide whether we need an evidentiary hearing. But instead he said, well, let's get to the evidentiary hearing. Let's start hearing from all sorts of witnesses like Fani's father and Nathan Wade's former partner. And let's talk about how many bottles of wine they had, when they went to Napa Valley. I'm like, what in God's green earth does this have to do with anything, as you've so perfectly put it? So I don't know what's going to happen now. I don't think she's going to get bounced, but I'm one of those people that thinks that she didn't do herself any great favors from the sense of being a prosecutor on the case when she defended herself. I like that she defended herself, but I think she might have won the battle and lost the war. The more she defended herself, the more she looked like she wasn't a dispassionate, impartial prosecutor. And that may concern McAfee, who's inexperienced himself. Look, they're both so inexperienced. They're both up for election with Donald Trump. They're both down ballot on November 5th. A retention vote on Scott McAfee, apparently, and Fani's up for re-election, just to show you how politics, law, and justice all of this. So we're going to keep a close eye on it. There's going to be a hearing this week. We'll cover it. It's on YouTube. We'll have a MeidasTouch channel up with it, and pre-game and post-game and all of that, as we like to do here on the MeidasTouch Network. Well, there you go. If you know about Legal AF, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. Take that clip. Ask others to join our audience. That would be really helpful to keep our show on the air. If you like lawyers talking about things that they know what they're talking about, you've come to the right place, the home of Legal AF, only on the MeidasTouch Network. Help them get to 3 million free subscribers before the election. It is that important. We do a show just like that clip you just saw twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube here for the MeidasTouch Network and on audio podcast platforms of your choice. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm Michael Popok. That was Legal AF, and we invite you to join our audience. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.